Bustin' mad like inside the dark, call me Bill Snatcher. Just the brother for the rapture. I hang live, holding on strong, hard to capture. Extravagant, resurrect the track and it's militant. And I react like a convict and start killing. It's manifesting. The God's work like appliances, dealing in my sacred life.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? It's your boy Naruto Explain here, bringing you guys another discussion for Boruto Naruto Next Generations, the anime. And while this is an anime discussion, I am going to say this to anime only fans. I am going to be referencing stuff that happens in Boruto chapter 55 up to chapter 62, where the manga currently is. I'm not going to go over major spoilers, but I would say these are going to be topics that are going to have light spoilers. And if you do not want to know what happens in Boruto episode 218, you probably want to click off of this video, because I am going to talk about the huge plot twist that happens in Boruto episode 218, which should be adapting Boruto chapter 55. So with that being said, let's get right into the topic. So a lot of you guys have been talking about the fact, and rightfully so, that the Boruto anime has gotten dangerously close to the manga. As of where we are right now, the anime is getting ready to do chapter 55, and you're in a situation where there's only 7 chapters, if you count chapter 55, separating the anime and the manga. And I've talked about it ad nauseum before, about the fact that this felt like 2004, where the anime was getting between 20 and 30 chapters within the manga, and that's when Kishimoto was building in little small time jumps. Like you had the 3-month time jump that happens between Naruto being told by Jiraiya that he's going to take him training, and then Naruto actually leaving to go train with Jiraiya. And then you had the 2.5-year time skip that takes place after that, that takes us into the start of Naruto Shippuden. But in the Boruto manga, because Boruto manga chapters are roughly 2 to 2.5 Naruto manga chapters, depending on the number of pages you use, we're at a situation where that's about 14 chapters of distance. And what you get in the Boruto manga is there have been subtle time markers that have been placed into the manga, some directly stated and some that are strongly implied. And I want to go over some of these with you guys, because people have been saying the idea that there's a Chunin exams that's happening so soon after Naruto versus Isshiki doesn't make sense. And I think it does when you go back and you look at the manga and you read it very closely. And I do want to talk about this huge thing that's in the fandom of people saying they think that there's a 6-month time gap, because Amato in chapter 61 says that everything that happened 6 months ago, he wouldn't have predicted it like this. I want to touch on that as well. I'm not opposed to the idea of there being 6 months that pass between that, because it gives the anime a lot of room to work with. But I want to go over the things that we know for certain are time jumps that happen in the Boruto manga, and try and put at ease some of the fears that people have about the anime and about it going like completely off track and being 100% disconnected from the manga. That's not going to happen. They said it back in 2018 that the anime was going to tell a parallel story to the manga, and it's going to touch on things that the manga doesn't touch on, stuff that happens in between the manga continuity. So a good example of this would be how the Versus Momoshiki arc has an 8-month time skip between the Versus Momoshiki arc and the events of the Vessel arc. The Versus Momoshiki arc and Chunin exams takes place around Boruto's birthday in March, and then Naruto's birthday is where you have the start of the Vessel arc, because that takes place on the anniversary of the 4th Great Ninja War. That's October 10th. So you're in a situation where all of these other events, car actuation, etc., took place during this time. Well, we have other markers here in the Boruto manga. Some are just as subtle as what you had between the Versus Momoshiki arc and the Mujina Bandits. When you read it in the manga, it really feels like everything happened back to back, much like it feels like in these current arcs. But just as you had subtle markers back then, you have subtle markers now that imply that there's been significant jumps in time, and in some cases you have direct marker with specific numerical value given to the number of days that have passed that indicate that we've had a pretty decent amount of time that's passed between all of these events. So people have said between chapters 55 and 56, there are indications that at most a week had passed between Isshiki being defeated and everything that happens after that. But I want to start with Boruto chapter 57, because in chapter 57, that's where we get our first indication that there's been a pretty significant jump in time. So after Kurama gets killed and Naruto is left without the Nine Tails power, and he's having to figure out what his next step is going to be, we get this 5 Kage summit with all the Kages, and Shikamaru is sitting there talking. They've gone over Amato's information, and it gets revealed that they've been assembling teams and they've been going to all of these car hideouts, and they've been not only looking for outer members, but they've also been looking for intel on Code, trying to find Code's whereabouts. And during this time, Code has been traveling, and we know that Code wound up at one of Boro's hideouts, a hideout that doesn't look like Amato is aware of because Amato did not get that information. But the fact is that we see Code traveling, and we don't know how soon after meeting Isshiki's spirit that Code began his traveling. So we could see Code going to some of those hideouts and destroying them. Logically, that makes the most sense because the manga did say that Code did destroy a lot of those hideouts and the information there and the portals and devices. So you could have a small cat and mouse situation where they're looking for Code and Code is covering his tracks. He had no reason to do anything like that because prior to this, he didn't know that Isshiki was dead. And that's just one of those instances where when you read the manga and you're not reading it very closely, you might look at that and say, okay, Isshiki pops up in front of Code and then Code goes immediately to Boro's hideout. That's not the case. There's small dialogue lines that are dropped in the manga that let you know there's been a little bit of time that's taken place. We just don't know how much time, but there's a little bit. He didn't go immediately to Boro's hideouts, and we don't know how many hideouts Kara has, but we do know that they have specific regions where each of the inner members are assigned a specific region. So you could have a pretty decent amount of time for anime original content there. And just to be clear, we've seen the Boruto anime absolutely milk and require fans to suspend disbelief for a long time. As recently as everything that happened after Naruto and Sasuke versus Jigen in episode 204. So in episode 205, Jigen says that he's going to need 10 days in order to recover, but that was not 10 days that passed. Jigen only got up to 10% of recovery. 10% of 10 days recovery time is 1 day. But the anime has a line where we find out that Naruto's been unconscious for 2 days. Regardless as to whether or not you believe it's 1 day or 2 days, the anime really expects you to believe that Jigen's been out of commission for quite a long time and only got up to 10% recovery during all of this stuff that takes place during that time. So you have the hospital where a full day passes, where you see the sun setting in episode 208. You have 209 where another full day passes, where you see the sun setting in that episode. And in 209, that's the episode where Kawaki has his vision of Konoha being destroyed and Shikamaru prevents him from leaving the village, and he and Himawari bury that wolf named Jaggy. Episode 210 where Sai and Konohamaru get their mission to go investigate Boro's religious cult. We see the sun setting once again. So just right there, you have 2 days that passed since the Jigen battle as of episode 208. Another full day passes after that in episode 209. Then another full day passes with episode 210, where they go hunting for information on Boro's cult and they run into Delta. And then another full day passes where you see the sun setting again in episode 211 with Kakashi versus Kashin Koji, but Jigen only got up to 10% recovery. This is the same thing as Naruto Part 1, to where they milked the hell out of a 3-month time skip for 80 episodes, where not only did you see Naruto and Sakura join Jiraiya to go look for Orochimaru's hideouts, but you also had the filler arc with Ramiru, where they had like the curry pepper stuff, and then you had the laughing Shino stuff and all these various exploits that were taking place during that time. It just requires you to suspend disbelief. And really and truly, I mean, Boruto's anime has done this in the past as well. When you read the manga versus Momoshiki and Mujina Bandits, feels like it's back to back, but we had the whole Mitsuki desertion arc and the Mirai arc took place. You had a lot of stuff that happened during that time period. The idea that the anime does some anime original stuff showing the hunting down of the basis for Kara and the rounding up of the outer members before you get to the 5 Kage summit, that's not something that's crazy right there. And that's actually halfway decent material right there for the anime to play around with before you get to the definite time markers that we have later on. How in Boruto chapter 58, Boruto gets those Byakugan suppressant drugs, and then in Boruto chapter 60, we find out that it's been 7 days since Boruto began taking those drugs 2 times a day. So you have a whole week worth of stuff that you can milk in that time period, and then you can allow them to find codes markers, and then you have another 10 days between when they find codes markers and the events that are taking place right now in the manga. So there's some definite room right there. Now I want to kind of talk about, in closing, this idea that people have said that there's a 6-month time skip, where in Boruto chapter 61, where Amato says that 6 months ago he wouldn't have predicted all this stuff took place. And I'll say this, I personally think that Amato was more so saying, you know, 6 months ago when he came up with this scheme, he wouldn't have thought that the events would have unfolded in the way that they did, though I personally call BS on that, but that's another video for another day. That kind of lines up with the fact that the car actuation arc takes place in the months after the Mujina Bandits arc and into the Vessel arc of the manga. So that's more so where I lean, but if the anime wanted to drop a 6-month time skip in that time after the 5 Kage summit and before Boruto gets handed those Byakugan drugs, I wouldn't be opposed to it, because this current director we've had has done some halfway decent anime original stuff. In fact, some of the anime original arcs, like the car actuation arc, are better than some of the manga arcs that we've gotten so far. So that's just my opinion on it. Kind of curious to see what you guys think about this. Where do you think is the most opportune time for there to be anime original content? Let me know down in the comment section below. But as always, guys, if you like anything I had to say, don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, share. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Have an awesome day, guys.